I'm a marine systems ecologist, now turned seaweed farmer. And my journey to this position is related to the topic of today in regeneration from the oceans. This is a picture of what I currently do and operate. It's a seaweed farm on the south coast of New South Wales in the Shoalhaven region. It's along the Shoalhaven estuary, and our factory's in Huskisson, Jervis Bay. Some of you might be familiar with that iconic bay and the marine protected area. This is inside our new factory in Huskisson, where we make a range of products from seaweed. I'll explain a little bit about why I became a seaweed farmer. It was all based on the regenerative capacity of seaweed. We currently capture wasted or lost nutrient streams, both carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, through our knowledge of ecological processes and water chemistry and biology. And we grow a biomass from that process. We grow equivalent of 100 tonnes of seaweed per hectare and annum, which if you compare it to a land crop, say wheat, might be 5 tonnes per hectare and annum. So it's about 50 times faster than other land crops. And from this seaweed, it's a unique species to Australia, and in the green category of seaweeds, we make a range of currently food products and going into the medical product space. But it's a platform. We've worked with plants, applications in soils, reducing plant diseases. We've worked in aquaculture feeds, and we're also going all the way up to biomedical devices from the products we make. And my vision was not originally to make this range of products, but to use seaweed to clean up the environment and regenerate the first part of what we do today, the lost nutrients. So I'll go, and because that's the focus of this presentation or this session today, I'll just focus on why I got there. I was at Stockholm University in the late 1990s, and I was given the opportunity for my master's research to travel to Sri Lanka and to work on the tiger prawn farm areas there and look at how can we solve the devastating consequences of rampant development without consideration for the environment. And this is what some of the coastal zones end up looking like around the tiger prawn farm in Sri Lanka, where there's poor regulation around whether you can chop down mangroves or not, and where you can build. I mean, some people were building tiger prawn farms on land they didn't own. They just built the farms. So we do have to be grateful for Australia for the regulation, even though many of us will complain about it. We need to take it on board, because you can end up with situations like this without it. And that's indeed what the aquaculture industry suffered in the Blue Revolution of the late 1900s, and destruction of coastal environments. It got a bad name. Carnivorous species were released where they don't belong, depleting wild stocks. The escapees we know of, you can now catch Atlantic salmon in the Derwent estuary. Spreading of diseases. We also know of the spread of antibiotics to try and circumvent that. Nutrient pollution, it's an intensive nutrient source. Chemical pollution, treating some of the diseases, and antibiotics, as I mentioned. The irony of this is that we can make aquaculture sustainable if we understand the ecosystems and regenerate and create a mini ecosystem in our seafood production. My opportunity in Sri Lanka was to do just that. This is an overview of tiger prawn farms that I looked at there on the west coast in the Chilau region of Sri Lanka. And you can see on the bottom left there 8 tiger prawn ponds at commercial scale. And the wastewater from these ponds and this farm was circulated to a deep sedimentation pond where there was denitrification in the sediments to get rid of some of the nitrogen, but also tilapia, which were food for the local people, as well as, and they ate small particles, and also algal ropes and milkfish in a following pool. And those removed even smaller particles and some of the dissolved nutrients in the water. And we also had mussels taking a third particle size, as well as continuing algal or seaweed ropes in treatment ponds. And then finishing the polish off with algal ropes, which also put oxygen back in the water, with some aeration in that process as well. And this whole aquaculture system could be closed. It could operate and regenerate its own oxygen, buffer the water, and clean up the nitrogen systems, because they were all captured in the other species of biomass here. So it was truly a regenerative, standalone ecosystem of itself that could last for the full 9 months of the grow out. And at the end of that, the water that was released to the local lagoons and estuaries did not have high levels of nutrient. And primarily, importantly, the tiger prawns were also healthy. The reason this farm did this was not environmental. The reason this farm did this was to try and isolate itself from bringing in contaminated water with white spot disease, because that was killing the prawns along these estuaries. So the reasons were different, but the way to protect yourself from diseases is to have a regenerative system like this. So my role in my research was to follow the water chemistry, and this is the key to regeneration in our food production systems, is to understand the budgets of the nitrogen nutrient cycles, not just the cash flow, which is what it was back in the 1990s, and they forgot that they actually do have to budget on where the nitrogen, especially loads, go. And to this end, seaweed, I found in this work, was really key. And it created, not only did it remove the nitrogen, but it created a new opportunity for economic prosperity. I'm just going to touch a little bit on the nitrogen issue. And actually, our previous speaker, Rob, did actually mention a lot about the nutrients. You know, carbon dioxide gets most of the attention today, and rightly so. We have a lot of fossil carbon emissions that we need to address, but the nitrogen release issues in our coastal zones are very scary as well, and they don't get as much attention. These blue areas on the map are hypoxic areas along our coastlines, where we're releasing and creating a huge imbalance in the nitrogen loads in these areas. It means that huge amounts of organic mass are deposited on the bottom, and hypoxia or a lack of oxygen is a result of this. And you can even see around Australia, where our large population centres are, we also suffer the same fate. And indeed, along the Great Barrier Reef, the reef suffers not necessarily hypoxia, but the corals don't thrive in a high nutrient environment like that. So there's a lot of proponents and people out there talking about carbon sequestration and emissions from seaweed, not so much about the nitrogen. And some of this hype, I call it, is real. But there's also some blue sky ideas that, in my view, we need to temper a little bit and get on with real opportunity that exists today. And as Tim Flannery will say in his book, Seaweed and Sunlight, if we plant 7% of the oceans with seaweed, we can, in fact, reverse climate change, as long as we sink that to the bottom of the ocean. So I'm asking, who will pay for sinking carbon dioxide to the bottom of the ocean, because that's a one-way channel for your investment. So I told Tim to go and take a cold bath, which he promptly did in seaweed. But you can read about these types of opportunities or listen to it on ABC Catalyst, which featured the opportunity of seaweed. But in my view, what we can do today, and we can action it right now, is to look at seaweed for food, because it's so much more efficient in the production systems. And why can't we achieve 10% seaweed in our food chain like they have in some parts of Asia? Indeed, seaweed is the biggest aquaculture crop by biomass today, and Australia doesn't appreciate that very much. We're Australia's very first food-grade seaweed farm, and we're very small. And we have a long way to go, but it's a big opportunity. You can see here that the seaweed production, it can actually target things like protein, plant proteins especially, that are growing now rapidly in the market, even supplementing some of the meat proteins if we want to. We can put 10% seaweed into meatballs, but we can grow more protein on a hectare than a cattle farm. We need to be cautious, though, with the hype stories, because you have to know how to do this. I get many people saying to me, I want to start a seaweed farm tomorrow. And I'm saying, oh, well, I'd like to start a quantum computing company tomorrow. You do need some serious background knowledge before you start these ventures, and that's something that's poorly appreciated. There's such an opportunity, though, to address some of the chronic diseases around the world by just adding a little bit of seaweed to the diet. This is an example of a clinical study in India using seaweed on anemic teenage girls, and anemia is the leading cause of maternal deaths still globally. About 20% of maternal deaths are caused by anemia or iron deficiency. And in this clinical study, they just added some green sea lettuce to chocolate and could increase the serum ferritin, iron, hemoglobin in these teenage girls in a 6-week period. The way we can farm these seaweeds here in Australia, we can target some of our point sources of nitrogen and carbon emissions. What we do on the south coast here is we work closely with one of the Southern Hemisphere's largest wheat refineries, and they have very large waste streams of carbon dioxide from their distillery fermentation processes, as well as nitrogen from the wastewater treatment systems. And this is all food grade nitrogen and carbon dioxide. And so we capture those streams directly into our seaweed production tanks. And in this way, we are closing a loop on a terrestrial food production system, not aquaculture this time, but terrestrial food. And we have no waste streams, or more correctly, we have oxygen and clean seawater as our waste streams. What our challenge is now is that it's important to get everyone to understand that this is something that is going to be driven by the consumer, the market pool, and we have to get it out there today. So that's what we currently do. We try and demonstrate that you can go to the supermarket and buy some seaweed pasta today, and that pasta has 10% seaweed in it. And this is just a graph showing that, this can have a massive impact on a global scale if we look at it. Currently, we're a very small farm on the south coast of New South Wales, but we have visions to scale to up to 10 hectares over the next few years with the right investment, and then to national and global sites. And if we look at it at a global scale, this type of seaweed production system, should we get to seaweed as 10% of land crops in this way, we could look at relieving 250 million hectares of land from food production, which offers opportunities for biodiversity. We could be looking at removing 375 million tonnes of greenhouse gases just from synthetic fertiliser production alone, let alone the other fossil inputs into food production. And we would also look at 500 trillion litres of water saved. Currently on the east coast of Australia, it doesn't feel like we need to be saving water, but we will experience drought again. And water is a critical issue in Australia, as we all know. So this is an impact opportunity that we shouldn't shy away from. And that's what we're at the start of a journey with here on the south coast with our farms, our products that we're getting to market as fast as we can. And we have a vision to a global scale for global sustainability and health benefits, as well as an exciting future of biotechnology opportunities.